Absolutely no painting instructions whatsoever. I don't have a, color list. I'm going to work off all my references and get into this Revell Kawasaki KZ900 Limited. So after working through the first couple of assemblies, started taking a closer look at my references and realized that in here, this is much more of like a flat aluminum up in here. This is duller, it's not chrome. And so, there's so many different subtleties in these pieces here, as well as the forks, as well as there's some scratches and a couple of deformities and some clouding in some key pieces. Like that's the front, that's going to be highly visible. So long way of saying, I think I am going to de-chrome everything, let it soak, and then scrubbed it with a toothbrush, and it still has all this residue left in there. So I'm going to bust out the ultrasonic and put all those pieces in there. Yeah, that worked. So all those are clean now, and I can get started on doing sub-assemblies. So there's the tank. I used some sheet styrene to reinforce the inside and then hit the top with medium thick super glue. The bottom portions of those forks are in two halves with the brakes attached. So they have a seam that had to be fixed, so addressed that and filled in some gaps. Took care of the exhaust pipes, brought those together, fixed all the seams. And then the two portions of the engine there, which will be brought together later after they're inside the frame. So there's the result of fixing that seam on the tank. A little bit more touch up, but that came out pretty good. Everything's cleaned up, so now I'll put it on pegs. Going with my standard go-to, the Mr. Servicer 1500 Black with the leveling thinner. So there's everything in the primer. I'm going to sort all that out and start working through the various colors. These body color parts, after the black primer, I came back, worked that tank some more, got that, the best I can get. I'm pretty happy with it. And then went to my reds. So I'm going to use this red and experiment with some yellow and see how much I can lighten that up. And the other thing I thought is going with a white primer, underneath this might help lighten it up a little bit too. The frame and that back wheel assembly, those parts in the gloss black, the Tamiya. All these parts here, as well as the fenders, the tailpipes, over here with the Alclad base. Started with the Alclad and used the airframe aluminum and the chrome. And believe it or not, the airframe aluminum was actually shinier than the chrome. So there you can maybe see the two round surfaces are much shinier and a different hue than the rest of it. Well, that's the airframe aluminum on those upper surfaces, and that's the chrome on the rest of the body. So that gave me a nice variation. And then I also hit these, I don't know if you could tell, but I didn't hit those with the Alclad base and then hit those with the aluminum, so those have a different hue as well. And then on the body color parts, I thought the red might be too dark, so I actually added, I want to say it's probably 2 to 7 is kind of where it came out. That's a little more orangey than that is. Just finished up the second round of painting, and on these body parts, after some wet sanding to get rid of a couple of bumps, came back, gave that a second coat, did the Alclad gloss clear on all of the chrome parts. So I went with the Molotow on the wheel rims, then came back around and hit everything with the X22 clear, starting with those wheels, and then went with what's becoming my go-to on these wheel spokes, which is using the silver stripe decal to get that detail in the center there. Then hit all the brakes with the Tamiya metallic gray, and then masked the ones on the front fork. And then I hit that front fork with the Alclad airframe aluminum on the upper portion and the chrome on the lower portion. So with all the parts painted, went back and used the aluminum, the chrome silver, and the black there to touch up all the parts. Put bolts on the frames and the brakes and various other pieces. Did the clear red and the clear orange on the turn indicator and tail light. And then this is just the rear wheel assembly dry fit. I want to make sure I address all the wiring, and not all the wiring that's necessary or required is included in the instructions. So I went through and marked the instructions with some additional notes on the wiring. For instance, I want to add a speedo wire going from the front fork to the speedometer, as well as a brake line for the rear brake, which I wrote in here. And you can see from my references, it runs from that rear solenoid on the frame to the rear brake. So I just drilled a hole in each of those, and then after I put it together, I'll run a single wire from one to the other. Then I used my hole cutter to cut 2 pieces of that adhesive backed mirror material, and I think that came out pretty good. Going back to the instructions and working my way through. So start by putting that rear wheel assembly into the frame, getting all those pieces of the frame in, using the ultra thin, and clamped it, let that dry overnight. And then proceeded to build out the engine, and all these parts fit really great. Started with that base, then built on top of it, and then that air cleaner. And then with that front fork, I actually had to build this jig so that I could hold it level while I put those other sides of those brakes on there. And it worked well, and I got them on. I have to say, as I'm putting this together, everything is fitting together like so easily. This is a very well engineered kit, I have to say. I just put this back fender in, and it just went up and in there, and then there's 2 little grooves, and it just slid right in there, and boom, it's in. So I just had to put a touch of glue on each side, and just went in super easy. All these engine parts fit in there, the connection points there, everything meets up. This fit right in there and met up. Yeah, very well engineered, I have to say. Now this piece here was kind of loose, and I was worried about it from the start, and sure enough, it did break off. So I actually used a new piece, which is just slightly larger in circumference, and it fits very tightly inside there. So I'm hoping for a good fit, because in the past I've had, on a couple of my motorcycles, this would be loose because of that connection in there. So I'm hoping this addresses that. Now, I hope I don't jinx myself, but the only criticism I have so far is the lack of color instructions in the instructions. But you know what? That's making this kit really fun, because I'm kind of working my way through between references and this being my this will be my 16th motorcycle, and so between references and the culmination of building 15 bikes, it's kind of fun working my way through and going, yeah, this should be like that, this should be like that, well, of course this should be this way. So I kind of feel like I've graduated from a novice motorcycle builder to, I don't know, a semi-experienced one, and it's really making this build fun. So built out the lights and turn indicators, and then the dials there, and then got started on the decals. Okay, done with the decals, and I was worried about their age, so started with the speedometers, and those seemed to go down well. Then went to the side covers, and those are snuggling down well. Then same thing on the side here, they're snuggling down really well. And that's all carrier film between the stripes there. And I was worried about cutting it away, and I'm glad I didn't, because it helped keep them strong while I moved them around. And then finally on the tank here, if it'll focus, you can see there's some wrinkles, but I'm not gonna push on it or anything. I'm just gonna let it snuggle down. So I think the next thing I can do that won't harm anything is put these wires on. I'll put up a reference. You can see there's spark plugs there. The kit does not come with any spark plugs, so I actually went to my spares box. Believe it or not, I now have a motorcycle spares box, and I found at least 2 of these spark plugs, and so I put one on each side on the outside, because all they do is they just have the hose going straight into the hole. So at least here on the 2 outside ones, it'll look a little better with a faux spark plugs, and all they do is just go up underneath the tank over this top bar and then back down again on the other side. All right, it's the next day, and that center pole is now strong enough, so I went ahead and glued that, built a jig for it, and let that sit another 24 hours. And then I came back and did those tailpipes, started on one side, and that all, again, attached really nice and came out perfectly straight. Then did the other side, same thing there. And in the center of the fork, I put that brake transfer piece in there, and then the 2 brake lines down from there to either side. And then installed that rear brake line in the 2 holes I drilled earlier. And then hit those dials with the X22 clear. And then to create those reflectors on the front sides up there, I first hit those with the aluminum, and then came back with the clear orange and put a touch of that on each side. So here's how those body parts came out. Laid down those decals, they went down pretty well. I did have to come back the next day with some Salvaset here and there to get rid of a few wrinkles. Then hit them with the X22, the Tamiya Clear, and let that dry. It came out really nice. Did a little bit of wet sanding in between those 2 coats, and then came back with 1 more coat, and I'm actually pretty happy. I'm gonna leave it like that. Everything about this kit, you know, including the decals, worked really nice. All that's left to do now is final assembly. So basically these steps here. So started with those body parts, and everything went on really well. Then the rear grab bar. Then I put on that main brake line up from that center part, as well as the clutch line on the handlebars in preparation to put those on. And those fit pretty well. And then finished up with those mirrors, as well as foot pegs and other parts on the sides. All right, there she is on the motorcycle shelf, and yeah, that's my 16th motorcycle, and I'm so glad it was this kit because like I said, I had to kind of use the skills that I've built up to work it, given that there was no color instructions, and that was a lot of fun. Everything about this kit, like I said, is well engineered, except, you know, 1 or 2 things. The front forks, they could have done it different, but easily as well engineered as a Tamiya kit. So just really enjoyed that, and hope you found that interesting. And as always, thanks for watching, and happy modeling.